Hey, this is Miss G, and today we're going to do a writing prompt with bubbleology that you read with Miss Kaylee earlier. So the first step that we're going to do is we're going to decode our writing prompt. Just like in test prep, when you decode your questions, we're going to decode the writing prompt just to see what we're going to write about, okay? To see what it's asking and make sure we get all of the parts. All right, so here's our writing prompt. You have read bubbleology. Write an expository essay including 2 things that bubbles can teach us. Be sure to include specific facts and details from the text. Your writing will be scored on the development of ideas, organization, grammar, and mechanics. Okay, so when we have a writing prompt, there's 2 things that we can go ahead and mark off automatically because we don't need them. They're something that we see all the time with our writing prompts, and y'all already know this by now, okay? This first sentence, you have read bubbleology, okay? I already know that. We already read it, okay? We read it together with Miss Kaylee. So let's mark out that first sentence, okay? The other one that we can mark out is this last sentence. Your writing will be scored on the development of ideas, organization, grammar, and mechanics. You already know it. You'll already know how your writing is scored. That is the writing rubric. So when you turn in something to us, that is how we grade it, okay? So you do not need to know about this last section because you already know how your writing is scored. All right, this middle is going to be our meat. That's the most important part of the writing prompt, okay? So from this, let's just go ahead and underline it because we know it's very, very, very important. Okay. Write an expository essay including 2 things that bubbles can teach us. Be sure to include specific facts and details from the text. All right, so the very first thing that we need to do with this meat is determine what mode of writing this is. Okay, so 5th grade, you have informative, you have narrative, and you have opinion. All right, so this is not going to be telling us a story. This is not going to be giving your opinion about bubbles. We are just going to give some, explain and give some information about bubbles, okay? So write an expository essay including 2 things that bubbles can teach us, all right? So the mode of writing is going to be informative. Okay? Expository just means explain. And informative just means explain. You're going to be explaining 2 things that bubbles can teach us, okay? So the next thing that we're going to do with this meat is we're going to form some questions with it, okay? What is this asking me to write about? And it's going to be 2 things that bubbles can teach us. So let's turn that into a question. What 2 things can bubbles teach us? Okay, that's my first question. We need to make sure we talk about 2 things that bubbles teach us in our writing, okay? So we got that one. There's something else underlined right here in the meat that's very, very important. Be sure to include specific facts and details from the text. Okay, that's going to be our text evidence. Now, I know that that is not considered a question, but it's something very important that we've got to include. So we include it in questions just so we don't forget to include it in our writing. Okay, so again, you've already read this text. I'm not going to read it with you, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start writing or answering the prompt and writing your essay with you. Now, the mode of writing is informative, and we have a strategy that we use with informative writing, and it is RACE, okay? The R stands for restate the question, A is answer the question in your own words, C is cite your evidence, and E is end it. So what we're going to go ahead and do together is we're going to restate our prompt, and we are going to write our very first sentence or our introduction sentence to our writing. I'm going to do that in purple because the R up here is in purple. So we are going to restate our question. We only have technically one question over here, and it is, what two things can bubbles teach us? So now we're going to write that into an introduction sentence that starts out our writing. So what two things can bubbles teach us? Let's restate that, and I'm going to put bubbles can teach us several things. Okay, so if you think back to the text, you might be thinking, yeah, it can teach us this, 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 this. There may be a lot going through your brains, and there are a few going through mine too. All right, so keep that in mind when we start to answer it in just a second. But bubbles can teach us several things. So let's go ahead and let's go to the A, and that's going to be answering it. And it's in your own words, guys, okay? So whatever you just had in your head thinking, that's what we're going to put. So the one that came to mind with me is in a story. It was comparing a bubble to a prism. And what a prism is, it's a glass box, and when something shines on it, you see a bunch of different colors like the rainbow, okay? And so the author was comparing those two things, saying that bubbles can teach us about light. So that's exactly what I'm going to put. For example, bubbles can teach us about light, and that's in my own words. So let's do that. For example, comma. That's a great transition word for, or transitional phrase for 5th graders. For example, bubbles can teach us about light. Okay, so we are going to be looking back in the story. I don't have a copy of the story with me, but you should in your packet. And I have written down that in the text it says bubbles can also teach us about light. That is the first sentence in the second or third paragraph. I'm not really sure, but let's go ahead and write that because we are citing evidence from the text to support that about teaching us about light. So let's go ahead and write that. In the text, it says, comma, when we cite text evidence, we need to tell it where it came from. You can say in paragraph 2, you can say the author says, you just got to let me know where you got this evidence from. It's from the text. So we have to tell where it's from and put quotation marks around it, okay? Bubbles. It says bubbles can also teach us about light. Okay? And we have to put quotation marks around that again so that we know that it came from the text. Okay? Now, I'm not going to stop there. I'm not going to just stop at text evidence. Okay? I'm going to say a little bit more in my own words. All right? So, what I talked about earlier in the prism and the light making all the different colors, that's what the author is trying to tell you here. It's trying to tell you that comparing a bubble to a prism, you learn about all the different colors that light makes. So that's what we need to elaborate a little bit on here in our own words again, just so whoever is reading your writing knows that you fully understand what the text is talking about, okay? So what I'm going to say is when the author compares the bubble to a prism, it tells us that bubbles can show different colors of light. Okay? It's teaching us the different colors of light. So that's what I'm going to put exactly. When the author compares the bubble to a prism, it tells us bubbles can show the different colors of light. Okay? So what you would do next is, you fifth graders, you need to include at least 2 pieces of evidence. So I have one here, but what you're going to need to do next is you are going to need to give me the second thing, or a second thing, another thing that bubbles can teach us other than about light. So in the story, it also says that it can teach us about making things stronger. The author talks about adding sugar to it and making it stronger, making it last longer. So you would say something about that and cite evidence and relate it to your lives, or something like that, like I did here in my own words, okay? You have to do that twice because you fifth graders have to have at least 2 pieces of evidence, okay? After you do that step again, the green and the red, then you can go and end it, okay? So something that I've taught my students is just say, in conclusion, and then restate your question up here. Wrap up what you're writing about. We are writing about bubbles teaching us things. So down at the bottom, we might put, in conclusion, bubbles can teach us many things. Even though bubbles are a little bitty object that you play with when you're kids, they can teach us a lot of different things. That's what you would need to wrap up at the bottom, okay? But I'm not gonna finish this with you. I want you to finish it, and if you have any questions, please be sure to contact your ELA teacher and they will help you out. Bye, y'all.